The wind carried the scent of rain across the Arizona desert that night, whispering through the dry grass and rattling the loose hides of the Apache warrior's hut. Inside, the flicker of a dying fire threw restless shadows across the walls. The man sat alone, sharpening the edge of his knife with slow, steady strokes, his eyes lost in the dance of the flames. His name was Taza, a proud warrior of his people, a man who had seen too much blood and carried too many ghosts. The land around him was both his cradle and his curse. Every rock, every cactus, every grain of sand held a memory of what had been taken and what was still worth fighting for. That night was supposed to be like any other, quiet, watchful, heavy with the silence of loss. But then, out of the dark came a faint sound, something soft and uncertain. At first, Taza thought it was the wind playing tricks on his ears. Then it came again, a stumble, a low cry, and the sound of someone falling near the entrance of his hut. He rose at once, his knife in hand, his body tense with instinct. Few ever dared to approach an Apache warrior's shelter uninvited. When he lifted the hide that served as a door, the sight before him made him pause. A young stranger lay in the sand, pale as the moonlight, half conscious and trembling from the cold. The boy, or perhaps a very young man, wore clothes that did not belong to this land, torn boots, a mud-smeared shirt, and a small silver cross hanging around his neck. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Taza hesitated only a moment before bending down and lifting the stranger in his arms. He was light, far too light, as if he hadn't eaten in days. The warrior carried him inside, laid him near the fire, and covered him with a blanket made from deer hide. He poured a small cup of water and lifted it to the stranger's lips, watching as the young man drank greedily before falling back into a restless sleep. For a long time, Taza stood there studying him. The stranger's face was not that of a man hardened by war or wilderness. It was soft, uncertain, touched by something fragile. He carried no weapon, no pack, no mark of tribe or allegiance. Whoever he was, he did not belong here. And yet there he lay, in the heart of Apache land, miles from any settlement, wounded and alone. Taza sat back beside the fire, his thoughts heavy. The world beyond the desert had been changing, filling with white men who came with rifles and papers claiming land that was not theirs. He had long since learned to keep his distance from them. But something about this boy felt different, almost out of place in time. As the night deepened, the stranger stirred again, muttering words Taza could barely understand. "Help me. They'll come for me." The voice was cracked with fear. "Who will come?" Taza asked quietly, but the boy had already slipped back into sleep. The warrior sighed and fed another piece of wood to the fire. He didn't know why he hadn't left the boy outside. Maybe it was the look in his eyes, that quiet kind of desperation. Or maybe it was something deeper, a feeling he couldn't explain, as if fate itself had carried the stranger to his door. When dawn came, the desert glowed gold and red. The air smelled of wet earth from the night's brief rain. The boy awoke slowly, blinking in confusion at the hut around him. His first instinct was to sit up, but pain shot through his leg, forcing him to cry out. "Do not move," Taza said, his voice calm but firm. "You are hurt." The young man froze, his gaze darting toward the warrior. "Where am I?" he whispered. "On Apache land," Taza replied. "You came to my door. I could have left you for the coyotes, but I did not." The boy looked away, shame flickering in his eyes. "I didn't mean to. I was running. I just kept walking until I couldn't anymore." "Running from who?" The boy hesitated, his hands trembling slightly. "Men," he said softly. "Bad men. They killed my father. They want something I have." Taza's eyes narrowed. "What do you carry that men would kill for?" The boy hesitated again, as if measuring trust. Then, from beneath his shirt, he pulled out a small pouch made of dark leather. "My father said it belonged to the old tribes," he whispered. "Said it held a secret they'd all forgotten. I don't even know what's inside." Taza took the pouch carefully, feeling its weight in his palm. There was something about it, something ancient. The stitching looked old, far older than the boy's people had been in this land. He could sense the memory of it, the echo of spirits long gone. "You should not have brought this here," Taza said, handing it back. "This is old magic, dangerous." The boy looked frightened but refused to take it. "If it's dangerous, then you keep it. I don't want it. I just want to live." The warrior studied him for a long moment. He could see truth in the boy's eyes, a raw fear that couldn't be faked. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "Then you will stay here until you can walk. After that, you go east, far from this place." But deep inside, Taza already knew it wouldn't be so simple. Fate rarely gave warnings without reason. As the sun climbed higher, he went out to hunt, leaving the boy to rest. The air was still and heavy, and not even the hawks cried from the cliffs. Something in the silence made the hairs on the back of his neck stand. He felt eyes watching him, unseen and distant. When he returned, the boy was sitting up, staring at the entrance with wide, fearful eyes. "They found us," he whispered. Before Taza could ask what he meant, the faint sound of horses came from beyond the ridge. The warrior moved to the doorway, his heart tightening. Dust rose in the distance, 5 riders moving fast. He could see the glint of rifles in their hands. "They're the ones who killed my father," the boy said, his voice shaking. "They'll kill me too. Please don't let them find me." Taza turned toward him, his expression unreadable. He knew this kind of evil. Men like those came with fire and greed, leaving only ashes behind. But to protect this stranger would mean declaring war again, and he had buried too many brothers already. For a moment he stood still, listening to the wind. Then he looked at the boy and spoke with quiet finality. "They will not touch you. You are under my roof." The boy's eyes filled with tears of relief, but Taza's heart grew heavy. He had just made a promise that might cost him his life. Outside, the riders drew closer, their voices echoing across the canyon. The air grew tense, humming with danger. Taza reached for his bow, his movements calm and certain. The boy clutched the pouch to his chest, trembling as if it burned him. And as the first rider crested the ridge, the morning light caught on something silver in his hand, a star-shaped badge that gleamed with authority but carried the stench of blood. Taza narrowed his eyes. These were no ordinary hunters. They came for something they didn't understand, and they would not stop until they had it. The warrior stepped forward, the old fire rising in him once more. The land seemed to hold its breath as the dust storm of hooves drew nearer. By the time the first shadow fell across the hut, Taza had already decided. Whatever this stranger carried, whatever curse or secret followed him, the warrior would not abandon him. Not while there was breath left in his body. In that moment, as thunder rolled far off in the desert and the riders closed in, Taza swore a silent vow to the spirits of his ancestors, to protect the young stranger who had appeared in his hut, even if it meant giving his life. And beyond the ridge where the storm met the sun, something ancient stirred again, as if waiting for the promise to be fulfilled. The sound of hooves grew louder, carrying the low murmur of men's voices through the still desert air. Taza moved to the doorway of his hut, his broad frame blocking the light. The boy behind him clutched the leather pouch against his chest, breathing fast. His fear filled the small space like smoke, thick and heavy. Taza could feel his pulse racing, though he stood still, calm as a mountain. He had faced worse odds before, but this time felt different. It wasn't just about survival. It was about the promise he had made, a vow older than his own pain. When the riders came into view, Taza counted 5 of them. Their clothes marked them as men from the eastern territories, dusty coats, wide hats, and faces hardened by greed. The one in front, the man with the silver badge, sat tall in the saddle, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. He scanned the huts and the open land before stopping on Taza's figure. The man reined in his horse, sending up a small swirl of sand. "We're looking for someone," he called out. "A young fella, about this high, light hair, travels alone. You seen him?" "Seen." Taza said nothing. The man smiled thinly, though his hand rested near the revolver at his side. "Don't play games, friend. There's a bounty on his head. Kid stole something he shouldn't have." The warrior's gaze didn't waver. "You are on Apache land," he said quietly. "Turn back." The man laughed under his breath. "That's funny. Don't think I've ever heard an Apache give orders. The others laughed with him, but it was an uneasy sound. They could feel the tension, too, the stillness in the air, the way Taza's hand hovered near his bow. The leader looked around once more, his eyes narrowing. If he's here, you're making a mistake. Whatever that boy's got, it ain't worth dying over. Taza didn't move, didn't blink. After a few moments of silence, the man spat into the dirt and jerked his reins. "We'll be back," he said, "and next time we won't be asking." Then the riders turned and vanished into the desert haze, leaving only the sound of hooves fading into the wind. Inside, the boy exhaled shakily, his body trembling. "They'll come back," he whispered. "They always do." Taza closed the flap of the hut and looked at him with calm eyes. "You will tell me the truth now," he said. "What is in that pouch? Why do they want it so badly?" The boy swallowed, staring into the fire. "I told you, I don't know. My father said it belonged to the old ones, the people who were here before any of us. He said it held power, something sacred. I didn't believe him until they came for him." His voice broke slightly. "They said he found something he wasn't supposed to. He tried to run, but they caught him. I barely got away." Taza studied him, his dark eyes deep and unreadable. "Your father was a seeker." The boy nodded. "He studied the old lands, the tribes, the stories. He said history had been buried under lies. He wanted to find what was lost." He looked up at Taza then, desperate. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just want to be free of it." The warrior turned toward the fire, his expression thoughtful. "Nothing comes without a reason," he said. "If this thing found its way to you, then it is meant to be carried. But the men who hunt you, they will not stop until they have it." The boy shivered. "Then what do we do?" Taza's voice was calm, steady. "We wait, and we watch." Outside, the desert seemed quiet again, but the silence carried a warning. The riders had not gone far. They would camp nearby, waiting for night or dawn to strike. Taza could feel it in the air, the same way a wolf senses the hunter's snare before it is set. As darkness fell, the fire burned low. The boy, exhausted from fear, drifted into uneasy sleep. Taza sat by the flames, his thoughts far away. He remembered his own youth. Before the wars, before the land was divided by fences and guns, he had known peace once when his people still roamed freely and the stars told their stories across the sky. But that time had been stolen, piece by piece. Now he lived in the shadows of those memories, a guardian of what remained. He glanced at the sleeping boy. There was something about him that stirred a strange feeling deep in Taza's chest. An echo of the old ways, perhaps, or a reminder of the sons and daughters his tribe had lost to the winds of time. Protecting him felt right, even if it led to blood. Later that night, the wind changed. It carried with it a faint scent, gunpowder and sweat. Taza's eyes snapped open. He reached for his bow and rose silently, moving like smoke through the dark. From the ridge beyond the hut, he saw the flicker of lanterns, 3 lights moving slow and steady. The men had returned, just as he expected. They thought they would catch him sleeping. He turned back to the hut and whispered, "Wake." The boy stirred, confused at first, but one look at Taza's face told him everything. He clutched the pouch close, his breathing sharp. "Are they here?" "They are coming," Taza said. "Do not speak, do not run unless I tell you." He motioned for the boy to crouch low near the back of the hut. Then he stepped outside, bow in hand, his body hidden in the shadows. The lanterns drew closer. Voices murmured, low, rough, certain. "There," one of the men said. "That's his hut." Taza waited until the first man reached the doorway before he moved. In a swift, silent motion, he drew his bow and released. The arrow struck the man's hat clean off, burying itself in the post beside him. The man stumbled back, cursing. The leader raised his rifle. "Hold your fire," he barked. "We just want the boy." Taza's voice came from the darkness, cold and steady. "You cross this line, you die." For a long moment, no one moved. The men shifted uneasily. The desert was too quiet. Even the coyotes had gone still. Then the leader spoke again, his tone darker now. You don't understand what you're protecting. That thing he's carrying, it's not yours. It don't belong to any of you. Taza's answer came like stone breaking. Then why do you hunt it? The man hesitated, his jaw tight. Orders, he said finally. There's a lot of money in it. Enough to buy a man a new life. Life bought with blood is no life at all, Taza said. There was another silence, broken only by the crackle of a dying fire. Then the leader gave a quiet signal. The men began to spread out, moving around the hut. Taza slipped back inside. The boy's eyes were wide, full of fear. They're going to kill us, he whispered. Not if you listen, Taza said. When I tell you, run east, stay low, follow the shadow of the cliffs, do not stop. The boy's voice trembled. What about you? Taza looked at him, and for the first time there was a faint trace of a smile in his eyes. The land knows me. It will keep me hidden. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You are not weak. Whatever they want from you, it must be important. Do not let them take it. Outside, a twig snapped. Taza turned sharply. The moment had come. He pushed the boy toward the rear exit of the hut and whispered, Go. The boy hesitated, then ran into the darkness, clutching the pouch tight. Taza waited until he was gone before stepping out into the open. The leader stood there, rifle raised, his face lit by the faint glow of a lantern. Where's the boy? He demanded. Taza's expression didn't change. Gone, he said simply. The man's jaw tightened. Then you're a fool. You'll die for nothing. Maybe, Taza said, but not today. The rifle fired, breaking the stillness like thunder. Dust flew. The men shouted. The night exploded into motion, and in the chaos, far from the hut, the boy stumbled through the desert, breath ragged, his legs burning. He looked back once, seeing the faint flicker of fire and shadow behind him. Guilt twisted his stomach, but he kept running. Taza's words echoed in his mind. Follow the cliffs. Do not stop. The ground beneath him was uneven, scattered with stones and dry brush. The moon had risen now, cold and bright. Every sound seemed louder, the rush of his heartbeat, the whisper of the wind, the cry of distant coyotes. He didn't know where he was going or what waited ahead. All he knew was that he had to keep the pouch safe. He didn't even understand why, but something deep inside told him it mattered. The weight of it against his chest felt alive, like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Behind him, gunshots echoed again, then silence. The desert stretched out endless and dark before him. He wanted to stop, to turn back, but the image of the Apache warrior standing against the fire kept him moving. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, he saw a faint light. A campfire, perhaps, or another hut. He stumbled toward it, every muscle aching, every breath sharp. He didn't know that the land he now crossed was sacred ground, that every step he took was watched by unseen eyes, older than any tribe or man. And as he disappeared into the shadows of the rocks, the desert wind rose again, whispering through the night as if carrying a message between the living and the lost. The night had swallowed the desert in silence after the gunfire faded. The stars were sharp and cold, scattered across the sky like old memories that refused to fade. Far from the Apache hut, the boy moved through the canyons with unsteady steps, guided only by the faint silver light of the moon. His clothes were torn, his hands scraped, but he didn't stop. The sound of his own breathing was the only rhythm that kept him moving. Each gust of wind made him glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see the riders again. But all he saw was emptiness stretching behind him, as if the desert itself had erased everything except his footprints. The pouch bounced lightly against his chest with every step, its weight pulling at him like a question he couldn't answer. He thought of Taza and the firelight in the warrior's eyes, the quiet promise that still echoed in his mind. The boy didn't even know the man's full story, but he had felt the strength of his words. Now that strength was all that kept him from falling apart. Back at the hut, the ground was scarred by boot prints and ash. Taza stood in the shadows of the rocks, his bow still in hand, his breath steady despite the blood trickling down his arm. The fight had been quick and violent. Two of the riders lay silent near the doorway, and the others had fled into the night, leaving their leader behind. The man with the silver badge was gone too, but his voice still lingered in the warrior's memory. There had been something strange in his tone, something that felt less like greed and more like fear. Taza crouched by one of the fallen men and searched his pockets. He found a small folded map marked with symbols he didn't recognize, spirals, arrows, and a rough drawing of mountains. Across the top, written in faded ink, were 3 words, "The Valley of Echoes." He frowned. The name was old, whispered only in the tales of the elders. It was said to be a place where the spirits of the first people still walked, where time itself bent like a river's curve. Few had ever gone there and returned. If these men were following the boy because of that pouch, then the truth might lie somewhere inside that valley. He burned the map, knowing others would soon come looking. Then he turned his eyes toward the east. The wind carried faint traces of movement. Someone running, alive, still moving. The boy had made it out. Relief touched his chest for a brief moment, before the ache of worry replaced it. The desert was not kind to the lost. By dawn, the boy had found shelter in a dry ravine. His body was shaking with exhaustion, but his mind refused to rest. He kept staring at the pouch, as if trying to see through it. He had thought about throwing it away more than once, but each time he tried, something stopped him. It was as if the object wanted to stay near him. He finally untied the leather strings and peered inside. At first it seemed empty, just lined with old dust. Then a faint shimmer caught his eye. A small piece of stone, smooth and round, no bigger than a coin. When he held it to the light, strange carvings appeared across its surface, lines forming a spiral that drew toward the center. He felt warmth against his palm, soft but real. For a moment, the desert around him seemed to blur, the sound of the wind fading into a low hum. Then it was gone. The boy blinked, breathing fast, staring at the stone as if it might move again. He didn't understand what he had just seen, but deep inside, he knew it was the reason men had died. In another part of the desert, miles away, the surviving riders regrouped. Their leader, the man with the silver badge, sat by the fire, wrapping a bandage around his hand. His name was Ward, and though his eyes were cold, there was something uneasy behind them. The men argued quietly among themselves about the Apache, the boy, the thing they were hunting. Ward silenced them with a sharp glare. "You saw what it did," he said. "That stone isn't just some relic, it's power. The kind men will pay anything for." One of the riders spat into the dirt. "Power or curse, I don't care. That Apache should have been dead. You saw him take that shot and still stand. Ain't natural." Ward stared into the flames, remembering the moment his bullet struck the warrior's shoulder. He had seen the blood, seen him fall. But when the smoke cleared, Taza was gone. He had fought men before, but this was different. There was something in the Apache's eyes that unsettled him, something that belonged to another world. He turned back to his men. "We'll track the boy. The Apache won't leave him to die, not after the promise he made. We find one, we find the other." As the men nodded reluctantly, the desert wind rose again, scattering the ashes of their fire. The sound echoed across the land, reaching the ravine where the boy slept in uneasy dreams. In those dreams he saw faces, his father's voice calling his name, a flash of firelight, and then darkness filled with whispers. A woman's voice spoke softly, distant but clear, saying, "The stone remembers." When he woke, the sun was already high, burning his skin. He forced himself to his feet and began walking again, following the faint outline of cliffs that stretched toward the horizon. Hunger gnawed at him, and his lips were cracked, but the promise of shade and water kept him going. Each step felt heavier, as if the land itself was watching him. By late afternoon, he reached a dry stream bed where a narrow trail wound between the rocks. He knelt to drink from a shallow pool and caught sight of footprints nearby. Bare feet, light and careful. He looked up sharply, his heart racing, but before he could move, a familiar voice spoke. "You move like a deer with broken legs." The boy turned. Taza stood a few steps away, his arm wrapped in cloth, his bow slung across his back. Dust streaked his face. but his eyes were alive. The boy almost cried with relief. "You're alive," he said. The warrior nodded. "You did as I said." "Good." The boy hesitated. "They'll come after us again. They won't stop." "I know," Taza said. "And there will be more of them." He looked at the pouch in the boy's hand. "You opened it." The boy nodded, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I had to. I needed to know." Taza studied him for a long moment. "And what did you see?" "I don't know," the boy admitted. "A light, like the air was moving. I think it showed me something, but it's gone now." Taza's expression darkened. "The spirits are waking. That thing you carry belongs to the first people of the valley. It was never meant for outsiders. Your father must have found it by mistake." The boy's voice shook. "Then why does it want me?" "Because you carry his blood," Taza said quietly. "And because the land has chosen." The boy frowned, confused and frightened. "Chosen for what?" The warrior didn't answer. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the east where the mountains shimmered in the heat. "The Valley of Echoes," he murmured. "That is where this will end. We go there." The boy hesitated. "Is it safe?" Taza gave a faint, grim smile. "No place is safe when men hunt power." They moved together through the canyons as the sun began to set. The rocks glowed red and gold, and the wind carried strange sounds, like voices whispering from the cliffs. The boy tried not to listen, but sometimes he thought he heard his name. When night came again, they made camp beneath a ridge. The fire burned small and low. Taza sat sharpening his knife while the boy stared at the flames. "Tell me," he said after a long silence, "why did you save me?" Taza didn't look up. "Because once, someone saved me when I was young and lost. I did not understand then, but I do now. The land watches those who honor life, and it punishes those who don't." The boy nodded slowly. "You think this stone is part of that?" Taza's eyes met his. "It is older than all of us. Your people dig in the ground and call what they find treasure. My people know better. The earth gives nothing freely." The boy felt a chill despite the heat of the fire. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote cried. The sound stretched across the desert, lonely and haunting. Far away in the distance, the faint glimmer of lanterns appeared again, small sparks against the vast night. Ward and his men were still coming, guided by greed and something deeper, something that neither of them yet understood. Taza saw the lights first. He stood quietly, watching them, then looked at the boy. "They are closer than I thought." The boy's hand went instinctively to the pouch. "What do we do?" Taza's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "We go to the valley, but to reach it we must cross sacred ground. The spirits there will test us. If they find you unworthy, they will not let you pass." The boy swallowed hard, glancing toward the mountains. They looked impossibly far away. And as they began their slow journey through the dark, the wind carried a strange sound from the east, low and distant, like the heartbeat of the earth awakening. Neither of them spoke again, but both felt it. The pull of something ancient, something waiting for them beyond the horizon. The desert night stretched long and heavy as the Apache warrior, and the young stranger pressed deeper into the land that few dared to cross. The moon hung low over the mountains, pale and watchful, lighting the path ahead with a cold glow. Each step felt heavier now, as if the air itself was thickening around them. The boy's feet ached and his throat burned with thirst, but he said nothing. He knew Taza would not stop unless it was safe, and safety was a word that seemed to belong to another world entirely. Behind them, faint trails of dust rose in the distance, proof that the riders still followed. Ward and his men had grown relentless. The desert had taken its toll on them, but the promise of what the boy carried was stronger than exhaustion. They rode with the hunger of men who had already traded their souls for gold and secrets. Taza could feel the chase tightening, like a noose around their necks. He moved swiftly, guiding the boy through narrow passes and over ridges where the rock itself seemed to hum beneath their feet. The air smelled of rain, though no clouds marked the sky. He knew what it meant. The valley was close. When dawn broke, the world turned to fire. The sun rose over the horizon, washing the land in shades of copper and blood. They stopped in the shadow of a great stone cliff. Its surface was carved with ancient markings, faded and half buried by sand. The boy reached out to touch one of the symbols, tracing the spiral shape with trembling fingers. "What does it mean?" he asked. Taza's gaze followed the carvings. "It is a story," he said softly, "of a time when the earth spoke and the sky answered. The first people came from the valley beyond this wall. They carried light, and the light gave them wisdom. But one among them tried to use it for power, and the earth swallowed him whole. Since then, no one who walks with greed has left this valley alive." The boy stared at the wall, a strange unease curling in his chest. "Then why are we going there?" "Because the truth is waiting there," Taza said, "and the truth is what they fear most." As the sun climbed higher, they followed a narrow path that twisted through the cliffs. The rocks around them rose like walls, towering and silent. The deeper they went, the more the air changed. The desert heat faded, replaced by a stillness that made the boy's skin prickle. Even the sound of their footsteps seemed distant, swallowed by the stone. By midday, they reached a wide clearing surrounded by tall ridges. At its center stood a formation of stones, stacked in a perfect circle. In the middle of the circle lay a pit of dry ash. The boy could feel something pulsing beneath the surface, like a heartbeat buried deep in the ground. Taza stopped at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon. "We are here," he said quietly. "The Valley of Echoes." The boy stepped closer, looking around. "I thought it would be bigger." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "Do not be fooled by what you see. This place is alive. It hides itself until it chooses to be seen." The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint whisper. The boy turned quickly, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, clearer this time. A voice low and ancient, speaking in words he didn't understand. His hand tightened around the pouch instinctively. The warmth from the stone inside it pulsed against his chest. Taza's eyes flickered toward him. "The spirits are speaking to you," he said. "They know what you carry." Before the boy could reply, the sharp crack of a rifle echoed across the valley. The bullet struck the rock beside Taza's head, sending a spray of stone chips into the air. The warrior moved instantly, pulling the boy down behind a boulder. The echo of the gunshot rolled through the cliffs, breaking the silence like thunder. Voices followed, rough, angry, growing closer. Ward and his men had caught up. Taza drew his bow, his movements calm and deliberate. "Stay low," he told the boy. Ward's voice rang out across the clearing. "You can't run forever, Apache. Hand over the boy and the stone, and I might let you live." The boy's heart pounded. He wanted to shout something, anything, but fear froze his tongue. He glanced at Taza, who crouched motionless, eyes fixed on the ridges. "You think you know what that thing is," Ward continued. "But you don't. Men died for it. Whole towns burned because of it. That stone is cursed." Taza's reply came steady and cold. "Cursed are those who chase what they do not understand." A tense silence followed. Then more gunfire ripped through the air. Bullets struck the rocks around them, each one closer than the last. The boy flinched at every sound, but Taza didn't move. He waited for the pause between shots, and then rose, releasing 2 arrows in quick succession. Both found their mark. The cries of the wounded echoed through the valley, swallowed quickly by the wind. Ward's voice came again, angrier now. "You think you can stop us with tricks and stories? We'll burn this valley to the ground if we have to." Taza's expression hardened. "The valley does not burn," he said quietly. The boy didn't understand what he meant, but as the words left the warrior's mouth, the air shifted again. A low rumble rolled through the ground beneath them, faint but unmistakable. Dust drifted down from the cliffs. The valley seemed to breathe. Ward and his men hesitated, their rifles lowering slightly. One of them looked around nervously. "Boss, something ain't right." "Shut up and keep moving," Ward snapped, but even his voice carried a tremor now. The boy pressed his back against the stone, his mind racing. "Taza," he whispered. "What's happening?" "The valley is waking," Taza said. "The spirits are watching to see who speaks truth." The rumble grew louder, and the ground began to tremble beneath their feet. The stones in the center of the clearing started to glow faintly, a dull red light pulsing from within the cracks. The boy stared in awe, feeling the warmth of the pouch spread through his chest. Ward saw it too. His eyes widened and greed twisted across his face. "That's it," he shouted. "The source! Get it!" His men began to move forward, rifles raised, their fear drowned by the promise of whatever lay beneath the ground. Taza stepped out from behind the rocks, his bow drawn tight. "You take one more step," he warned, "and the earth will judge you." Ward sneered. "You're not the one giving orders here." He fired. The bullet grazed Taza's arm, but the warrior didn't falter. He loosed another arrow, striking one of the men square in the chest. The others scattered, taking cover among the stones. The boy ducked lower, heart pounding, gripping the pouch so tightly his knuckles turned white. The stone inside was burning now, hot enough to hurt, but he couldn't let it go. He felt something pulling at him, something deep, calling his name from below the earth. Taza turned toward him. "Listen to me," he said, his voice fierce. "Whatever happens, do not let them take it. You are the key to what they seek. The stone knows your heart. It will only open to you." "I don't understand," the boy cried. "You don't need to," Taza said. "Just trust the land." Before he could say more, another explosion of gunfire tore through the clearing. One of Ward's men had lit dynamite, throwing it toward the circle of stones. The blast ripped through the air, shaking the ground violently. When the smoke cleared, the center of the clearing had split open, a deep crack running through the earth glowing with strange light. Ward stared down at it, eyes wide with disbelief. "It's real," he breathed. "It's all real." The boy could barely hear over the ringing in his ears. The glow from the crack was the same color as the light he had seen when he held the stone in his hand. It pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, bright and alive. Taza pulled him to his feet. "We must go," he said. But before they could move, Ward stepped into their path, his revolver raised. "Not this time," he said, his voice trembling with both fear and triumph. "You'll give it to me, or you'll both die right here." The boy looked at him, then at Taza. "If I give it to him, will it stop?" Taza shook his head. "It will only begin." The ground trembled again, stronger this time. The air shimmered with heat and sound, the whispering voices growing louder, overlapping, filling the valley with an ancient chorus. The boy's vision blurred as the light from the pouch spilled out through his fingers, swirling upward in a halo of fire and dust. Ward stumbled back, his gun dropping from his hand. The men who had followed him began to shout in panic, some running for their horses, others frozen in place. The earth's rumble became a roar. Taza reached for the boy's arm, but the light between them flared brighter, forcing him to step back. The boy's eyes glowed with the reflection of that light, fear and wonder mixed together. "Taza," he cried, "what's happening to me?" The warrior's voice was almost lost in the roar of the valley. "The stone has chosen, the spirits are awake, hold fast!" The boy tried, but the power was too strong. The wind whipped around him, lifting the sand in spirals. The valley itself seemed to come alive, the stones humming, the ground shaking, the light rising higher. Ward fell to his knees, staring up at the boy as if seeing something divine and terrible all at once. And as the desert sky darkened with swirling dust and light, everything hung in a breathless pause, between destruction and revelation, between the old world and whatever waited beyond. The valley trembled like a living heart, and the light that poured from the crack grew until it swallowed everything. The wind roared through the cliffs, and the boy felt the force of it tearing at his clothes and hair. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, only watch as the light wrapped around him, pulling him toward the glowing center of the earth. Taza tried to reach him, shouting his name, but the distance between them stretched like a river of fire. The ground beneath them split wider, glowing veins of gold and red spreading across the desert floor. Ward's men had already scattered, their shouts fading into the wind. Only Ward himself remained, frozen at the edge of the chasm, his face pale and hollow. The boy clutched the stone against his chest as the light surged upward, bursting into the sky in a column so bright it drowned out the sun. For a moment, the world went silent. Then the light began to fade, and with it, the trembling eased. The air stilled. Dust settled slowly over the clearing. When Taza opened his eyes, the valley was quiet again. He looked around for the boy, fear gripping his chest. The crack in the ground had sealed, the glowing veins now dark and cold. The circle of stones lay broken, their markings half buried in the sand. Then he saw movement near the edge. The boy was lying still, his hand resting over the pouch, his breathing faint but steady. Taza hurried to him, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me?" he asked. The boy's eyes fluttered open. He looked tired, but there was a calmness in his face that hadn't been there before. "It's over," he whispered. Taza nodded, though he wasn't sure what over meant yet. The valley felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of centuries had lifted. He helped the boy sit up. The pouch lay open beside him, but the stone was gone. All that remained inside was a fine layer of ash, warm to the touch. "It's gone," the boy said softly. Taza looked toward the horizon. "No," he replied. "It has returned to where it belongs." Ward was still there, kneeling near the far side of the clearing. His revolver lay forgotten in the dirt, and his eyes were fixed on the ground. He looked smaller now, his shoulders bent beneath some invisible burden. When he finally looked up, his voice was rough. "What was it?" Taza regarded him in silence for a moment. "It was not meant for you," he said. Ward gave a broken laugh, shaking his head. "All that chasing, all those men dead, and for what?" He stared at his empty hands. "There's nothing left." "There was never anything to take," Taza said quietly. "Only something to protect." Ward's gaze drifted toward the boy, then back to the valley. His face softened for a moment, as if he understood something he wished he hadn't. He stood slowly, his boots crunching on the stone. "I'm leaving," he muttered. "There's nothing here worth dying for." Without another word, he turned and walked toward the cliffs. The desert swallowed him as the wind picked up again. For a long time, neither Taza nor the boy spoke. The sun climbed higher, painting the valley in shades of gold. The silence felt peaceful now, not heavy as before. Birds began to circle overhead, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. Taza finally rose to his feet. "Come," he said. "We must return. The valley has given what it needed to give." The boy looked around one last time, his eyes tracing the broken stones and the faint shimmer of light that still lingered on the ground. "What happens now?" "Now," Taza said, "you carry the story." They began the journey back through the narrow paths. The air was cool, and the sound of their footsteps echoed softly off the rocks. The boy felt different inside, though he couldn't explain how. It was as if something had changed in the way he saw the world. The colors sharper, the air thicker with meaning. As they walked, Taza spoke again, his voice low. "Long ago, the first people believed the land had a memory. Every act of kindness, every act of greed, it all stayed in the earth. When the time came, the land would decide who it remembered." The boy glanced up at him. "And what does it remember of us?" "That depends on what you choose to do now," Taza said. They camped by a stream that night, the first water they had seen in days. The boy sat by the fire, staring at the reflection of the flames in the water. His thoughts drifted to his father, the promise of answers that had led him into the desert. He had found more than he'd ever expected, but it wasn't gold or power. It was something older, something that could not be sold or stolen. Taza watched him silently. "Your father sought truth," he said at last. "But sometimes truth hides itself, so we learn to look deeper. You carry that same fire. It is why the stone chose you." The boy frowned. "But I don't even know what it wanted from me." Taza shook his head. "It wanted you to see. That is enough." They sat in quiet for a while. the night alive with the sounds of the desert. When the boy finally drifted to sleep, Taza stayed awake, his eyes on the stars. The valley's light still lingered in his mind, and though he could not explain it, he knew the balance had been restored. By morning they reached the ridge that overlooked the plains. The desert stretched endlessly before them, the same land that had swallowed so many secrets, and yet remained eternal. The boy turned to look back once more at the mountains behind them. "It doesn't feel like it was real," he said. Taza smiled faintly. "The most real things often do not." When they finally parted ways, the sun was high and the wind gentle. Taza placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your path will not be easy," he said, "but remember this. Every step you take, the land listens. Walk with respect, and it will guide you." The boy nodded, holding his gaze. "Will I ever see you again?" "Perhaps," Taza said. "But even if you don't, I will still be watching. The spirit of the land connects all who walk it." Then the warrior turned and disappeared into the desert, his figure growing smaller until it blended with the horizon. The boy stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of both loss and peace. When he finally began walking again, he didn't look back. Years later, when he had grown into a man, he would return to that valley. He would find it quiet and still, the stones once again half buried in sand. But when he pressed his hand to the ground, he would feel the faint warmth beneath the surface, like the heartbeat of something ancient still alive. He would tell others what had happened there, the truth of the valley, the story of the Apache warrior, and the lesson the desert had given him. The story spread across the land, passed from traveler to traveler, from campfire to town square. Some believed it, others did not. But those who had once sought the valley for its riches never returned. And in time, the land reclaimed what was left of their greed. The boy, now a man, built his life not on wealth, but on the quiet strength of what he had learned. He taught his children that the earth was more than soil. It was memory, and it remembered kindness as much as it remembered harm. He told them that truth was not found in gold or stone, but in the choices a person made when no one else was watching. And every night when the stars lit the desert sky, he would sit by the fire and listen to the wind. Sometimes it whispered his name. Sometimes it carried the sound of distant footsteps, light and steady, like those of a warrior still keeping watch. The valley remained untouched, hidden from maps and forgotten by men. Yet those who wandered close spoke of strange lights on moonless nights and the faint hum of the earth beneath their feet. They said it was a sacred place, a place where the land remembered everything it had ever seen. For the boy who once carried the stone, it was not a place of fear but of peace. It reminded him that every ending was only another beginning, and that the land, like the heart, always healed when treated with respect. And so, the desert kept its silence, the wind its song, and the story of the Apache warrior lived on. Not in books or gold, but in the quiet truth passed through generations. It was the truth that life, even in its harshest moments, always finds a way to renew itself, just as the valley had done. In the end, the boy's journey was not about the stone at all. It was about understanding that what we chase is often not what we need. The greatest treasures are not buried in the ground, but carried within us. The courage to face fear, the wisdom to protect what is sacred, and the humility to walk gently upon the land that gives us life. And so the desert slept under the endless sky, timeless and still, keeping its secrets safe, waiting for the next heart brave enough to listen.